everybody. Welcome to the Withered Flowers podcast. Today I have with me Auntie Laura. Say hi, Auntie Laura.
Hi.
And my
Hello.
name, hey girl, and my name is Digital Girl. And this is our first podcast for
Yay.
Withered Flowers. So it's the inaugural. I'm so excited. How you been, Auntie Laura?
Been good. I've been really looking forward to us recording our first episode of our reread. Now that we got a official English translation, so I'm really excited to dive in. I know sometimes we read things unofficially, and sometimes the translation, can kind of be lost. So it'll be really good to read, what it is officially and get some more insight into what's going on with our favorite couple. So, yeah.
Yes. So, for those of you that don't know us, and of course you wouldn't know us very well because this is our inaugural podcast, we love to read manga. We love to read manhwa. And today we're actually going to cover the first chapter of a very popular manhwa by the name of Tears on a Withered Flower. So, let's actually talk about it. What is this?
Well, if I were to personally sum it up, I would say that Tears on a Withered Flower is about Nahesu, who is a 33-year-old divorcee. She has really been through it. This is about her and her healing journey. This is about her, learning to love life again, or living life, I should say, after being with a very, very toxic ex. And yeah, just wait till we get into him real good. She meets a younger man who wants to learn the ways of adult love, and this is their journey together. I will also say that there may be some trigger warnings with this story just because they do deal with certain topics, which we will always make sure to let you know up front. I will say that we do also have a Discord server, Withered Flowers, and a lot of our members say that some of the things that have happened to Jesus they can relate to just because they have gone through things that are similar. So that's one of the things that I appreciate about the story is just how relevant it is, especially right now, with behaviors towards women. So I'm really excited to get into this and really deep dive. So, what are your
Absolutely.
takeaways on this story as a whole?
On the story as a whole, I am a big fan of dark romance, thrillers, and for me, Tears on a Withered Flower really embodies that dark romance element
Oh,
without being too
definitely.
cliche. And you get the thriller too. It kind of reminds me of watching not a sitcom, but a series online, except it's all drawn. And I have to give a shout out to the author, Gainim, who dropped this Korean webtoon in June of 2024. As soon as I read the first chapter, which we're actually going to do a play by play of in a few minutes, I was locked in. And honestly, as you said, Auntie Laura, there were a lot of things about this story that I made a visceral connection to. And from day one, once I actually got into the story, I've been on that roller coaster ride ever since. And there is no end in sight for me because I'm going to be there until, man, I'm going to be there to the side stories. Let's be real here, okay?
Oh yeah, me too. I mean, I actually didn't catch on to this series until about maybe I want to say maybe chapter 9 or 10 possibly, somewhere around there. So and I like, you know, uh romance comics to an extent, but
Mhm.
the thing that really grabbed me about this one is like the realism of it. And it's like
Mhm.
I also like to read a lot of romanticy, you know, cuz sometimes you just want a guilty pleasure. You just want to read something that is going to be full of the well-known tropes, like the divorced empress or something like that, but sometimes it's really nice to like really read something that has like meat that you can really make a meal off of. And I will say that Gay Nim has given us a most magnificent feast with this story.
Oh,
So,
yes.
yeah, so with that being said, do you think we should go ahead and dive in?
Heck yeah. Just so you know, I know that, there's a lot of webtoons out there, but this particular one is set in modern day Korea, in Seoul, actually. So the setting is all pretty realistic and relatable as it goes for, the current times. So let's actually just get into it, right?
All right, let's go ahead and get on in. All right. So the first panel that we get is our female lead, which is Nahesu. It looks like she's walking down her steps, because she does live in a like a basement type of apartment. So she's walking downstairs, and then the next panel we get a man and a woman being together kind of or getting ready to be together in the biblical sense, if you get what
Spicy
I'm saying.
situations.
Oh yeah, there's a little bit of spice there. It's not all the way there, but it's there. So we don't see his face, we don't see the face of the woman that he's with, but we see that he's trying to take off her bra, she's trying to take off her shirt. So then it cuts back to Heisu, she's still outside her door, and then we get another cut of the woman on top of the man. Um, and because it's webtoon, English webtoon, there is some things that have been censored. But as of right now, that's fine because we have a good gist of what's going on. So Heisu walks in, and then we get the first bit um of the story, and it's from her perspective, and it says, I can't remember if it was from a movie or a TV show, but there was a line about how you can never go back once you see your partner having sex with someone else. And while we're getting this dialogue, it's kind of going back and forth. So well, not really back and forth, but we see her like walking down her hall. Then she notices two pair of shoes. One of her ex-husband and another pair of women's shoes she's not familiar with. And then, we get from like down the hall, we can see there's like the light of a TV or something, and then there's noises, which I'm sure you know what I mean. And then we see her walking in the hall, and then when she gets to the doorway, she is seeing what's going on. And what's interesting to me about this is like the color scheme that Gainem
Mhm.
uses for some of these panels, because we get this like reddish pinkish color, which to me is like passion. And it could be different types of passion, like, passion from being angry, it could be erotic passion, so I really like the color choices that she makes in these few panels.
Yeah, the author Gay uses a lot of muted colors in the webtoon overall. And as we we're watching the scene, one of the things I like about the opening to this webtoon is that it is very cinematic. There's a lot of
Mhm,
perspective switches. There's a lot of anticipation that's being built in the first few panels. And for the scenes where they're the spicy scenes where the man and woman are getting it on, that whole it's tinted in red, like you said. And
mhm.
we're not, as the readers, when we're reading this for the first time, time. We're not clued in on what that really means, but that color of red comes up quite a bit in the manhwa itself. And
Mhm.
not only that, but the actual palette for the the main color palette for the manhwa is very muted, dark, kind of almost, I want to say, glum at
Yes.
the very beginning.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then when we see those like passionate scenes where Naheso is walking in on her partner or whoever this happens to be in the first few panels with this woman, you can see like the actual red is illuminating her as she finds
Mhm.
herself watching her partner.
Yes. And I mean, I will say that, you know, I feel bad for her, you know. I really do because I mean, just seeing something like this, like you come home from work, you've had a long day, and then just to come home and see that, I mean, that is just going to F your day up to the nth degree, And what's surprising to me is how, like, she's not exactly calm and she's in shock, but it's it's interesting to see like how wide her eyes are and how it's almost like she just can't I mean, she just can't believe it, and I can't say that I blame her. I mean, honestly, if that were me, I'd be marching in there with a baseball bat, be like, who you doing it? Who are you? What are you doing? With my partner, with my man. So I give her or I give her props, for not freaking out. So, I don't know.
You know what's crazy? I would have flipped out as well, to be honest with you. But the next scene, we don't even get to see the flip out because what ends up happening is we realize as soon as we get to the next panel, this is a dream sequence and Homegirl is at work.
Mhm.
And probably sitting in one of the most uncomfortable positions I've seen. Like,
Yeah.
you fall asleep sitting up, and it looks like from what we're seeing in the subsequent panels is that she's at work and she's reflecting on the fact that she's had this dream about her husband having sex with a random faceless woman, right? And she's realizing that she's dreaming, and now it's just time for her to go back to work. So we get to see this character going back to work and interacting with her environment. Um, the with this particular manhwa, the muted colors are back. There's no more red, but now she's interacting with her boss, and there seems to be a situation that her boss wants to talk about, and we realize that her boss is giving her a month advance on her salary. Um, because she requested it. And he seems like he's nice, and doesn't necessarily. The thing about it is, I'm noticing this, and I don't know if you noticed this in the initial chapter. Um, Despite the fact that she's actually like had this scary dream and her boss is actually giving her this advance, we don't really see much of an expression change from this character in the initial scenes, right? What did you think?
Yeah. Well, I kind of what I find interesting, and I'm just going to backtrack for a second.
Hmm.
What I find interesting is that when she wakes up, her inner dialogue it says it's that dream again.
Ah,
The one
yeah.
where I catch my husband sleeping with another woman. So To me, I kind of feel like she knows that there is something going on with their relationship, but maybe she can't quite put a finger on it. Because usually, when people have dreams like that, it's usually your subconscious trying to tell you something. And even if it wasn't, him cheating on her per se, it could, that could be like symbolic of something, right? Because sometimes we dream like really weird stuff, and we don't really know what it means, but we know that it's our brain trying to tell us something. So I think this here is like her brain giving her a warning that there is something going on with the relationship, or at least that's my theory anyway. Um,
Yeah, I can understand exactly where you're coming from. I just think it's kind of not odd, but more like telling that if she's had this dream multiple times, we don't see any like we see her be flustered because she just woke up from the dream, but we don't see any outward reaction from her. Otherwise, we get, luckily for us, because the style that the author used, we get a lot of introspection, which helps us understand what she's feeling in that moment. But definitely, I know if I were to have a dream about my significant other cheating on me and then catching them, I would wake up real aggravated and just a little bit more flustered.
yeah,
But
I
it
would.
seems that she very much is like back to business, interacting with people despite the nature of the dream that she's had.
Well, I feel like because this is the first chapter, we can't, I know why she is acting this way. But if we were reading this for the first time, we could say that it's probably the reason why she's not really shaken or anything is because she's at work and she's probably just trying to focus on getting through the end of her shift. That's, or at least that's my take on it. But it's like you said, like we get her, going back to work. Her boss calls her over, he wants to talk to her, and then, like you said, he gives her like an advance on her pay, which is for like a month. And it looks like to me it's not so much that she's not reacting, but I think it's more of, if you look at her body language, like her head is bowed, even though she's standing up kind of straight, like it almost looks like she might be hunched over ever so slightly. And I kind of feel like that, she's uncomfortable for having to ask for this money, but it's obvious that she needs it for some reason, because I feel like, everybody has a certain amount of pride. No one likes to
Mhm.
ask for money, really. That's like one of the most anxiety inducing things that you can ever do, in my humble opinion. It's like the more broke you are, the harder it is, but what choice do you have? Depending on your situation. So I kind of feel like, it's not that she's not, you know, it's not that she doesn't have a reaction, but I think it's more of she's just trying to, be calm about it, because I mean, we don't really know what her situation is. And I think, you can't just freak out over every single little thing, so it could be that maybe she's just kind of sort of ashamed. Maybe ashamed is not the best word, but it could be, a hit to her pride that she's, asking about this money, especially when, her boss is saying that, he had to scrape the cash together, since he couldn't transfer it into her account. So immediately that tells me that there's something kind of sus going on.
Sus and financially wrong, like, there's something going on.
Exactly.
There's no in normal stable situations, you're not gonna be asking for a month advance on your paycheck unless, of course,
Exactly.
there's some issues.
There's something
But I
going on.
But I think she took that pretty much with grace, because in the next scene, the boss is saying that he wouldn't want to lose a great employee like her, who's like family because she's very hardworking, and she bows to him and says, "Thank you very much," takes the money. Um, I think for me, it's just like in this situation, looking at it from with my virgin eyes at the time, it there's the moment where I was like, what is actually going on here? And the way that the character is drawn is she looks youngish
Mhm.
woman who clearly is at work, but you don't see any real expression on her face. So I'm just like, what is she feeling in this moment? And I guess, like looking at it and knowing like this woman's financial circumstances are not so great and she just had this weird dream. Maybe it's just because it's me that I would like show my irritation on my face because I sometimes I can't hide my expression. She's got a pretty good poker face, I'll tell you that
Yeah,
much,
she does.
given
Mhm.
the
Yep, she
nature.
does. Oh, this poor thing. Spoilers. But
Yes.
anyways, um, but to move on, because I don't wanna give anything away. But yeah, like,
Indeed.
yeah, and I kind of agree with you. Like I mean honestly, I think it's just cuz she woke up and now she's trying to like, readjust, but I think part of her, maybe feels bad because she had to ask for him to give her cash instead of sending it to her bank account. Um but uh but after we get that interaction, and honestly, I'm happy to see that she's got a good employer, like she's got a good boss who's looking out for her because you don't really see that a lot, nowadays. Because most of the time, some managers, I can talk, um, will say, will just be like, well, that's your problem. So
Mhm.
it's really great to see that you have, a manager that is willing to look after an employee, especially one that's worked for him for a long time, because I feel like we don't see a lot of that nowadays. Um, and it's sad, but here we are. But I'm glad it worked out for her. Um, but then when we get to the next panel, um, he's asking her, by the way, are you still trying to pay off the, and then she looks, I don't want to say flustered necessarily, but she's like, yeah, the interest rates are brutal these days, unfortunately. And then he asked her, what about your husband? Didn't you say he just got a job? And she's like, yeah, he's still on probation, so he's not getting paid much yet. But it's okay. We're both working hard to make things better. So now we kind of get a better understanding about her financial situation. We
Mhm.
find out that her husband just got a new job, but he's not getting paid that well, which is, pretty standard. Usually, I don't know about in South Korea, but I know here in the States, it's usually 90 days. They'll bump up your salary a little bit.
Yep.
So we see that she's hopeful that, this is going to make things better. And I will say that, me personally, I've had some like medical debt in the past, and it felt like forever to pay that crap off. And I can only imagine what she's probably going through right now.
Yeah. I think having a good employer is great, and I can tell from the expressions from what, like, those common tropes where you have a person in a position of power and you're like waiting for that moment for the manager to act skeevy, but thankfully in these scenes that we're seeing, the manager's like seems like more of a father figure because after she talks about the money issues, he looks at her and he's just like, well, that's good. He better be working as hard as his wife. Now let's get back to work. It's almost closing time. So he doesn't harp on it, even though in the his expression in that particular scene seems like he's like, well, it is what it is. But he doesn't harp on it. He helps her out and they're back to business, which I appreciate because, we live in a society now where people who can someone in need, there's uh there could be a disadvantage, and especially with people in power, you could find it's a common trope. People take advantage of that or start
Yeah,
acting
they do.
skeevy. But thankfully, in these first few panels, it was actually a very pure familial scene that we're seeing rather than the common trope of the boss being a, a
Like a total
weirdo.
asshole.
Exactly. So it's like
Yeah.
nice. You got a good boss. You're working in a good place that cares about you, cares about your situation, and is not going to try to harp on you or preach to you about it. They're just some very supportive environment, which I appreciate.
Yeah, I do too, and I love that for her, especially like as we get deeper into the story because this poor woman needs all the allies she can get, and it
Absolutely.
and honestly, it's kind of nice, to read a manhwa where the first chapter isn't like full of tropes. And I get that tropes are tropes for a reason. In some instances, I do enjoy the standard tropes, but it is kind of nice to see that we're getting something that like feels real. And I know we'll probably be, repeating that over as we get more into the story, but I feel like this just I think this gives us a little bit of breath of fresh air before we get really into it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I agree with you on that. I'd gotten accustomed because I'm an avid reader of webtoons. I'm an avid reader of manga in general. Um, it it can be a bit of like jarring to get all of the tropes thrown at you at once, and this particular manhwa, this webtoon, doesn't do that, which is nice because it like turns some tropes on its head. You
It
know,
does.
and
And I
and
love it.
I appreciate that. I was like, "Oh, well, first of all, just being the avid and maybe rabid webtoon reader that I am, I was like, "Oh, I'm waiting for the boss to do something weird." And he didn't. And I was like,
Yeah. I mean,
"Amen to that."
oh my gosh, like what does that say about us when we're waiting for the other shoe to drop? And
Like
something so simple is like, "Hey, I gave you an advance you asked for. Here you go." But I will say, like, real quickly, I love how, like, the boss, you can tell, like, he's got opinions about her husband, but,
Mhm.
because that is some major side eye, you know?
Yes.
I mean, he is really giving some side eye, but I don't think it's at her necessarily. I think the side eye is for her husband. Um, and you know what? Bless that dude. Bless him for giving her husband the side eye, even though he isn't there. I
And then
mean,
giving grace too, because it could be
exactly.
very awkward if you're like, all right,
Oh,
now I'm gonna
definitely.
preach to you about your situation and tell you
Exactly.
about your husband. I think there was a level of restraint on both sides in this
Yes.
interaction, especially
Mhm.
given the fact that he's, doing her solid and like doing her a favor, but she's
Mhm.
also an exemplary employee that he cares about and treats like family. And you see that dynamic right at the forefront, that she actually has a support system where people respect and value the work that she does, which is great because it's like it sets that foundation that hopefully this continues. But in this
Mhm.
moment, you already bucked the trope of the creepy boss, and I appreciate it. Thank you, boss.
Yes. Thank you, boss man. Um Well, so after we get done with that particular interaction, it cuts to Hey Sue at work. She's at the register cashing someone out. And then one of the customers says, Ajima, two more orders of pork belly. And for those that don't know, Ajima is a term commonly used to refer to married women or middle aged women. It's almost like, auntie. So she says, "Oh, I'm coming right up." And she serves the food. She's the table that she's at, she sees like a young couple. They're like, "Oh, you take it. It'll make me happy. No, you need to eat it. I'll feed you." They're just being cutesy. And she's just, Jesus doing her thing. And then we get some inner dialogue here. It says, "People in love are beautiful. Whether it's an epic romance or a cheesy cliche, it doesn't matter. Love alone is enough to make them shine like stars. I suppose their beauty comes from being young. When you're young, you've still got the courage to love and fall hard. What does that make me then? Still and well past my prime. Would anyone find my life beautiful? And honestly, this makes me sad to hear
Mhm.
how she describes, like, how she sees love and how she describes herself. You know,
Yeah.
I hate it for her.
And she's a really pretty woman. Like, it's one of those like muted beauties where she's like got large doe eyes, she has a curvy body, very cute. I would call it like a pixie face. Like she's almost
Yes.
elfin.
Mhm.
Um, just very clean, fresh faced appeal, but she's very solemn. And that goes back to me like to me, even like her introspection is very solemn and just a little
It is.
sad.
It is. I mean, honestly, like to me, just reading this for the first time, like as, you know, when you put this inner dialogue together with what you see at the beginning,
Mhm.
you could definitely tell that there's some kind of issue, in her love life. Like obviously there's problems with her husband, because I don't know, like, I kind of feel like if you were in a good place mentally, I don't think you would ask, would people think me stale and well past my prime? Would anyone find my life beautiful?
Yeah.
I mean, because, and I will say this really quickly too. Like, I feel like, generally speaking, I feel like there's a lot of pressure on women to always be beautiful. But the thing
Mhm.
is that nature happens. There are things that happen in nature that we cannot control. And I feel like we sometimes are taken to task for it. Like wrinkles and your boobs sag and you get fat sometimes. I
And your
mean that's just
knees hurt.
exactly, like there's so many things that go, start to go when you get older, but yet we're supposed to be still held to that standard of beauty, and I feel bad that she feels like she has to live up to that, you know. Um anyways, I get off my soapbox, but it's just sad to
Worries.
me that she feels like her life is stale. Um
I
I hate it.
I agree with you. So, like, we're getting clues. Like, we don't know how old she is. We actually don't even know her name, right? Like, in these, like, the first half of this particular series, like, we don't know anything about her other than she's a solemn beauty who clearly is being we're clued in that she's, of the auntie age, which we don't know what that really means because she doesn't
Mhm.
look her age. Her face belies her age, whatever it
Yes.
happens to be.
Mhm.
And she's even reflecting on how she's viewed by others around her. And as a reader, the first thing I'm thinking is like, what she got going on? Because she looks really pretty to me. She's sad. It's like a tragic beauty to me. But I don't understand why she's looking at herself and thinking, would anyone find her or her life beautiful? But we already have the clues right now from the panels we discussed that her financial situation isn't great. Her relationship with her husband seems to have bred a sense of insecurity because this is not the first time from the intro. This is not the first time she's had this dream about him cheating with another
Mhm.
woman and her walking in
Mhm.
on it. Everything is something in the water ain't clean. And there's obviously for every clue that we get, there's some reason behind it. But I feel really sad for her because there's nothing about her that says flashy. Like if you look at her character design, everything about her is very muted, but she's still a very beautiful woman, despite the fact that the coloring that they give her could be considered or even described as mousy. Her actual facial features are actually really pretty. And she's
Oh,
wearing a
yeah.
muted colored turtleneck and some jeans and she's wearing her apron for work, but you can't like hide the fact that she's actually a very curvaceous vibrant woman, but her thought process is very muted, sad and solemn.
Yeah, and then, I mean, even when you get to, like, the end of that inner dialogue with her, just standing there. Like her face looks like really forlorn, like she looks like, you know, just witnessing like the couple being together and then just being, I mean, if you've ever worked in any kind of service industry, you've come across like that couple where it's like, oh, honey, and I mean, I'm not trying to take away from that, but when you're in a situation where things aren't good, and you're witnessing what you don't have, it's almost like a slap in the face. And obviously, those people don't know that, but it's
Mhm.
enough to make your self esteem just take a nosedive because it's like you're comparing yourself to their situation. And it's like, well, why can't my situation be like that? So of
Yeah.
course it's going to make you like sad, and maybe even lonely. I mean, honestly, like just looking at that panel right now where she's asking if anyone would find my life beautiful, just her body language, like her facial
Yeah.
expression, it just looks like sad and lonely to me, you
Very
know?
lonely. I agree with you on
Yeah,
that. That's
yeah.
very isolated, very lonely, very just forlorn.
Very much so, poor thing. Um, but yeah, but then like it moves, like we get like the next panel, it looks like they're tossing off, their aprons. And then we get I don't get it. Why do they keep calling you Ajuma? And this is her coworker. And I will say that I love her coworker in so many ways. Um, but anyways, she says nobody calls someone your age Ajuma these days. And then Jesus is like, "Well, I am a married woman." And then her coworker is like, "Come on, you can get mad every once in a while. I don't know any other woman who in her 30s who's this pretty. You always wear the same outfit, never put on any makeup, but you're a solid 10 out of 10." And then Jesus says, "Flatter me all you want, but you won't get anything out of me." And then her coworker is kind of like hugging her, and she's like, "Hey, I'm not trying to get anything. I'm just happy to have such a hot coworker." And then, all right, time to go home. So this tells me that Jesus, at this place where she works, she's got some pretty solid coworkers, and a good
Yes.
boss. And I love this for her. I
Yeah.
almost want to say, like, if I didn't know any better, like they're friends, like I could totally see them hanging out.
Absolutely. I think this is particular the boss, and just for the listeners cluing in, the type of establishment that she works at is a food service establishment, but it looks like Korean barbecue. Um Which, like, love me some Korean barbecue, but having worked half of my life in food service, that is not the easiest job to be in, to be work in a restaurant as a server, a
Mm-mm.
hostess, whatever it is. You're on your feet 24/7. You're client facing, and the worst kind of customers I've ever had in my entire life are the hangry ones. I'm not gonna lie to you. So,
Yes. Oh my God,
uh,
yes.
shout out to our pretty Ajima in her 30s. We ain't got her named yet in these panels, but you know what? I salute you because I have been there, and being able to keep a solemn yet straight face in the face of adversity, known as being in the food service industry. You have my heart and my support, girl.
Amen. Yeah. Like, just to piggyback off of that, like, I've never been a server, but I have worked in restaurants. Like, I have worked at like bagel places. I worked at a pizza place, a burger place, not fast food. But most of my experience has been at the register, so or bussing tables. And even then, that's not always easy because sometimes you
Nope.
just get people that, they try to get something free. It's like, "Oh, well, I didn't like my food, but you ate it. I want my money
Yep.
back, but you ate it." So,
Yep.
yeah, been there, done that, got the t-shirt, not going back. Or at least not
Same,
willingly.
girl. Not
Um,
willingly. I mean, if push comes to shove, I know I got the skills, but I have done all of the above, from fast food to mid-level dining, even fine. And you know what? I still have PTSD to this day, and that's okay sometimes to be like that. So nice,
Mhm.
did
Yeah,
you know, like,
sometimes it'd be like
what are you
that.
gonna do?
Oh, well, I mean, feed them and hopefully they don't come back to you. Um, but what I really appreciate about her coworker is that, she really seems like a girl's girl. Like she's telling Hey
Mhm.
Stu, she's like, you always wear the same outfit, you don't wear any makeup, but you're a solid 10 out of 10. And she's like, I'm just, happy to have such a hot coworker. And I will say that, like, while she's saying this, Jesus putting on her coat, and honestly, like, Casey looks a little happy here. Like she's got a little small
Yeah.
smile, so I just love her friend at the barbecue restaurant. Like in later chapters, like it just makes me so happy that she's there for Jesus. Um,
Absolutely. They have a cute, like, interaction because even just the response from her is like, "Flatter me all you want, but you won't be getting anything out of me. Like,
mhm,
stop trying to charm my pants off," type situation. It's like very cute, girly, and like humorous. So you do see that, like, finally get to see really a hint of her smile, and
mhm.
that adds to the element of her beauty. But like, you can tell that this particular environment that she works in is very supportive, which I think honestly says a lot about the people she works with in her as well, and I particularly love it. I actually like that family dynamic that they have.
Oh, me too. Like, honestly, I would not be surprised if the barbecue restaurant was almost like a haven for her in some ways just because of
Mhm.
the people that she works with. And I've been in that situation too where, I hate the actual job, but I love the people that I work with, So
Mhm.
not that I think she hates the job because obviously she's been there for a while, but I think it must be a relief to her to have, to work around such great people, who actually give her support, like financially and even, just like moral support, because I mean, it's obvious she's got stuff going on. So, I think the encouragement is probably something she looks forward to when she goes in.
Absolutely. And now that she's walking out of the actual job and going home, the scene shifts again. So, as I said before, it's very cinematic. So, we get these viewpoints, and now we're actually watching not the actual main character walk home. So, her neighborhood, let's just say, we get a scene of her back as she's walking up um, a long flight of stairs, and she's walking in between buildings, and it's a very it's back to that muted palette where there's not a lot of light, it's pretty dark, and we get this viewpoint of her her thoughts. So it's narrating out, and she's thinking to herself, though and when she says she's talking about her coworker, was complimenting me, I found myself thinking that her bright smile and open, innocent heart made her more beautiful than any pretty face ever could. And then we get a cut of her continuing to walk, and now she's walking through an abandoned alleyway. The radiant inner light that comes with youth wasn't something that could be replicated. And at this point, similar to what we've seen in the first few panels of this webtoon, now she's at the door of her apartment again. And rather than it being a dream, this time it's real. And we can see that the light is on in her apartment, and she's inside, and she's at the door, and her hand hovers at the door handle. And we see her opening the door, and she's still thinking, by someone like me. And we see her as she's opening the door, her face goes from muted to really gloomy, really, really gloomy. It's almost, despite, like I said, that she's not showing emotion, but it's a solemn face that she makes. And then we cut to a man who has red hair, and he seems to have noticed that the door is open and he's looking in a direction. And it says, admittedly, a part of me was jealous of that beauty. So the next scene that we see is a gentleman. He's sitting at a low table on the floor, and that table is littered with bottles, glass bottles, and it looks like it's soju
Like
bottles.
soju. Yeah, maybe a beer bottle or
Yeah,
two.
maybe
Mhm.
a beer bottle, but it's a lot of bottles, girl. Like
Yeah.
maybe 15, 16 bottles and cigarettes, and
Mhm.
it's a pretty big space that she's walking into. It's maybe the living area, and there's also like the laundry there, but this man is sitting at this little table staring at her coming in, and it has this like ominous, almost dreary air around these scenes, right? Because we are reckoning with the force perhaps that actually makes her feel dreary, right?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like looking at the scene where she's looking at him and we see him, like it just kind of dawned on me like the way the spacing is, cuz it's almost like, you know, obviously there's distance between them. And I feel like the way that this panel is drawn is emphasizing that. It's not just physical space that is between them, but but it's like I'm trying to figure out how I want to put it. I feel like it's not just physical space, but it's also, like
Emotional.
emotional distance. Maybe that's what I was trying to say. Thank you for hanging in there. It was a journey, but we got there. Um,
Indeed.
yeah, but you can easily see like there's distance between them. And like even when you look at like the panel that you were talking about like before, like when she's about to walk in the door, it's like everything has gone out. Like the light is out of her eyes. She looks super super serious. And all she's doing is just like walking in the door. And like when you are with someone, who makes you unhappy, like going home is like the worst thing that could ever happen. Like, I remember when my husband had a job that he absolutely hated. And it's like, I love my husband, but it's like every time I would come home, I would dread walking through the door because I know it was going to be like, you know, 30 to 45 minutes of him, just complaining about his job. And to be fair, you know, I get it. I get it. But the
Mhm.
job was affecting him so much that it made coming home like I would just take a deep breath and be like, okay, let's see what's going on. And I
Yeah.
would walk in the door, you know, and gratefully he is definitely not with that job anymore, but when you have something like that where you know something bad is going to go down as soon as you walk in the door, it's hard to, keep up any kind of energy. It's like any good energy that she had when she left the barbecue restaurant has just been gone because the next panel we see her husband and he's just like literally dead eye staring at her. Like, you know,
Absolutely. There's no
yeah,
pleasantries whatsoever. There's no happy to see you in that
yeah,
face. It's kind of,
nah. This is a
nah.
broken man. This is a man beaten down by life.
Is
And
it
he
beat
has,
down by life, or is it beat down by all those bottles littering the table?
I mean, column A, column B. I mean, I have other opinions, but I want to save them for future episodes because there are opinions that I have that I can't state yet just because we are too early in this story. Um,
Oh, well, you
yeah.
know what? We're too early in the story, but we're not too early in the story because guess what? As soon as this man who we don't know opens his mouth. He validates every little bit of tension that's in the scene between her bracing herself to open the door and him giving her the most sinister stare down. The next scene that we get after it pans out to show both of them looking at each other is this man talking. So validating any fears that I had about him not necessarily having a character that actually is synonymous with what we've seen thus far with her coworkers. The first thing that we hear out of this man's mouth that we can assume is her husband is, "Would
Give
it
it
kill
to
you
me.
to yeah, would it kill you to put on some makeup?" And he's like pointing with some chopsticks in hand. And we see the next scene, it's not, like there's the woman putting down
Mhm.
this pot and he's still talking. Most women at least try to look nice when their husbands come home from work. And we know that she just came home from work. She had this
Mhm.
pleasant conversation with her coworker about her being pretty despite the fact that she doesn't wear any makeup. And they're like, you get these affirmations from somebody who views you as a 10 out of 10. And the minute that she walks through the door, the first conversation that we're getting from this man as an intro to who he is, outside of the fact that now we know that this is the same man that we saw in the dream sequence cheating on her that she walked in on, he's talking about her appearance and how she as a woman should try to put on makeup and try to look good for him when he gets home from work. And he apparently arrived home from work before she did, and it's
Mhm.
clear that it's nighttime, right?
Yes.
Um,
Mhm.
Now we're getting a real viewpoint into why she's so solemn and dreary. Because I don't know about you, but the first thing I want to hear when I walk through the door is recriminations about my appearance. I mean, I yearn to hear that after a long day at work, right?
If I was Jesus, I would have thrown that ramen on him. I'm just saying. Anyways, let me dial it back. Um, so I did want to go over like some of the inner dialogue, because I feel like this kind of sets us up a little bit. So I'm going to backtrack for like 2 seconds.
Sure.
So we get, so we go back to the part where she's walking in through the door and it says, the
Mhm.
radiant inner light that comes with youth wasn't something that could be replaced by someone like me.
Replicated by someone like,
hmm Sorry,
yeah.
replicated by someone like me. Admittedly, a part of me was jealous of that beauty. So we get here that, obviously it seems like, you know, she feels like she doesn't have that inner light anymore because she views
Mm.
herself as no longer young. And we know this because of this POS ginger that's telling her that she should wear makeup. And the thing is what gets me is that even in the next panel, because like she obviously cleaned up after him a little bit because now we see when she's bringing the pot to the table, we see that the bottles are on the counter now. And,
Mhm.
and he's just sitting here watching her. And then he's like, oh, most women at least try to look nice when their husbands come home from work. And then in the next panel, he starts eating, right? And she's like, no, we barely have enough money to cover rent. And then he's like, hey, even girls who work part time for 1.8 million a month, and this is in won, um, manage to show up with a full face of makeup. And poor Jesus is just sitting there because that's all she could do. Her face is like really stoic. Because I feel like she's kind of prepared for some kind of shenanigans when she comes home. And then this guy, I'm trying not to be triggered, y'all. But then the next
Mm.
thing that comes out of this ginger's mouth is, Stop making excuses. You're just lazy and you know it. And
Mind
let me
you.
tell you, friends, my beautiful
Mm.
flowers, this is what I call all of our members on our Discord. My beautiful flowers, I was so triggered by this because my mom raised me not to take any crap from no man. And I
Mm.
come from a redneck part of Florida, so you can only imagine how this triggered me. But my
Mm.
beautiful flowers, I wanted to punch this man. This was the first time I read it, and any time I reread this first chapter when I get to this point, I'm just like, serenity now. It's just a start.
Serenity now. To be honest with you, the scene, I was just like, take up your arms, and it's time to take one of those bottles and reenact a bar fight because literally she just came home from work. And the first things that she has to do is clean up after this man and
Mhm.
listen to him berate her as she
Yep.
puts before him the food that he didn't have the wherewithal to cook for himself. He didn't cook for
Exactly.
himself. He didn't clean up after himself. He's just
Mhm.
waiting for her to walk through the door so he can neg her. And you can see the light going out of her eyes and her disassociating from the full situation, which is really heartbreaking to watch, especially given that we've seen that this woman can smile, but here she is in a situation with a man telling her that she's lazy after she just got home from work.
Mhm.
What was he doing?
Yep.
What,
Because
sir?
apparently
What are you
cooking
doing?
ramen is hard. Boiling some
It's hot.
water, and I guess putting a package of noodles in there is really difficult. And I guess you must have to have a chef's degree or a culinary degree to put a packet of flavoring in there.
Yes, I think he
My
was waiting to
flowers,
season. Yes,
yeah.
he was waiting to season that ramen with insults, girl.
Yeah, he really was. I mean, it makes me, like I said, if I was Nahisu, I would have taken that ramen and I would have dumped that on his ginger head, and I would have been like, well, I guess you're going to be too lazy to clean that up, aren't you? And I would have went to
Ugh,
bed.
but
I mean, I am my mother's daughter. Um, you
indeed,
know,
but in this world,
makes
we
me feel
see
bad.
she's it's clear that there's a pattern here, right? Like she's
Yes,
accustomed to it.
unfortunately.
She's accustomed to it. She doesn't really react to it in the way that's like this is fresh or new information, which is heartbreaking in its own way.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, when I look at that picture of her just sitting there, with the way that she's posed, she's like leaning, she's like kind of sitting sideways on the floor, leaning on one arm, like, almost on like her leg. Like, I almost feel like this pose right here is just for her to brace herself for what's coming. Because sometimes, and I don't think people really realize this with like body language, but sometimes people physically do things, even though it's just words, they are physically bracing themselves, for what's to come. Like I used to, be in customer service for this company, and sometimes I would have to tell people things that they didn't want to hear. And because they couldn't see me, sometimes I would like close my eyes and I would hunch in on myself like I'm getting ready for someone to like hit me, because that's how it is sometimes. Like people will just be nasty out of nowhere. Like I've had people
Yeah.
say some brutal things to me like on the phone, like questioning whether I was a woman. I've had people call me stupid. I've had people accuse me of lying to them, and so on and so forth. And um and I've also had this man call me woman one time, which did not go over well with me, and that conversation promptly ended. But my point is that you can tell by her, the way her body language, that she knows this is coming and she's bracing for it. Um, you
Yeah.
know, and then he says, the whole stop making excuses, you're lazy and you know it. And then we get some of her inner dialogue after that, And she's like, I wonder if he knows how expensive makeup is these days. It's funny, really. He won't even use 1,000 won on me, which is about $1 in US currency. And then he's like sitting
Mm.
there eating his ramen with his stank face, because that is a stank face if I've ever seen one. And he's like, you make me look bad when you're walking around with a face like that. And then
Mm.
he's just slurping that ramen. Girl, my beautiful flowers.
Audacity. The audacity.
Yes. And he's just slurping.
He's just slurping, still surrounded by soju bottles, mind you,
Yep.
and slurping away at the food. And our our female lead is not eating, and
Yep.
she's not eating. She's just watching him as he consumes the dinner that he probably could have made himself. Um, after she got home from a long evening at work, because it's nighttime.
Mhm.
Like the overhead lights are on outside the windows in the scene. You can see that it's dark outside. Um, this particular space seems their apartment seems vast, but it's not. But it's very gloomy. The atmosphere in
Yeah.
here, the vibes
Oh,
are real
definitely.
off.
Well, if you really look, like at the way that the apartment is, I mean, it looks very clean,
It's very
you know,
clean.
but it's very stark. Like it's almost minimalist, and I don't think that that is a design choice. I think, you know, it's bare minimum is because that's all they can afford.
Yeah.
Especially given what we know about their financial situation. Because there's like really, if you look at it, there's such a lack of comfort, you know, in this house. They only have the floor to sit on, they have this one little table, you know. I mean, I feel like this is like representative of their life together right now. Everything is like bare minimum, everything has a function, you know, it's empty and almost barren in a way. And I think, Gainem does a very good job of not only giving us the dialogue, but she also tells a very good like visual story. Like there's so many nuances we can pick up because of the way that the panels are designed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's um we have a few clues of how stark this space is. Given that we already know this gentleman in these scenes, he just started a new job. He doesn't get paid very much. She also has to work. And in order to like afford to make sure, keep everything straight, she had to ask for a 1 month advance at work, which means that she's not going to have any money for the month after that advance. So there's some critical things that need to get paid. She gets
Mhm.
home after like her job does her a favor, and the first thing that she gets when she walks through the door is insulted about her appearance, and compared to other women who work part-time jobs and how they can wear a full face of makeup, and she's thinking to herself like, you don't even want to spend a single dollar on me, but you want
Mhm.
me to go get makeup and paint my face before I go to work. And he then shames her about her appearance, which honestly, if you look at this woman, she's gorgeous. She doesn't need makeup to enhance her appearance. She works in food service and, God knows what else, but he's just like, you make me look bad when you're walking around with a face like that. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, sir,
Yeah.
that is,
I
oh,
just want to slap him. I mean, he just has one of those faces that's just slappable.
so
Um,
slappable. And
yeah.
you're right about her having that, like, not necessarily defensive. I think her posture is deceptive deceptively leisurely. Like it's like both sitting on the floor on this small low top table, which is not uncommon in both Korean and like traditional like Korean or Japanese households. But there's like a lack of furniture. There's only like a rack there. Outside of the low top table, there's a rack that has their laundry on it in the same room, and there's not really any other furnishing other than like a storage cabinet that's off to the side um in the walkway when you come into the apartment.
Mhm.
And then there's a few storage boxes set on top of that, which gives you this idea of it being very stark inside. And while this man is slurping away at his at his noodles, his big old pot of noodles that he doesn't even ask her if she wants any, mind you.
Mhm.
Um, we're getting the introspection from the female lead again, and she's reflecting again on love, which this inner dialogue actually makes me pretty sad
Yeah,
because
it really does.
given we get a great snapshot of the current dynamic between her and her husband, and her first thought as she's watching him eat is, does love expire too?
Ugh, I hate that. I really do. I mean, I get that like there's frustration, right? When you have um when you're in a marriage and things are not going well financially, like that is a lot of stress. you
Yes.
know and I get that, and I get that he's probably frustrated because he's got a job but the money's not coming in yet. So even though he's working, they're still struggling. And I mean, in some ways, like, I can appreciate that, because I remember when my husband got fired from his job, and it wasn't, that's a story. But he got fired from his job, so I went and got a part-time job after, working debt collections for like a couple of months. And oh my
Mm.
God, the anxiety is just
Oh my
unreal.
goodness.
But I mean, I will say that, like, the Hubs did everything he could. Like, he did Lyft, he did some DoorDash, and then he would come home and apply, apply, apply. So it wasn't like he was just sitting around doing nothing, but it was rough for a while, you know. So I can appreciate, like, the stress that it puts on a relationship, because you don't know if you're going to have the money you need to pay for the things that you need. Like, you need a place to live, you need electricity, you need
Mhm.
food, you need transportation. So I get that, but just for him to be like that is just like, oh, and after that interaction, I can see why she's questioning if love expires, because I
Yeah.
mean, if somebody, really loves you, they are not going to tell you that, you're lazy because you don't wear makeup. I'm just saying.
It's
But
such a
anyways,
shallow and trivial thing to think about in the bigger scheme of what's important in your partnership and in your current like financial circumstances, when it's been clear from the offset of this, like the beginning of this webtoon, that the
mhm,
financial circumstances that they have are not that great, and that shouldn't be the focus. But it is so, like, financial situations can make or break a relationship. But the thing is that when she walks to that door, he's not even harping on the financial situation, he's harping on her. It is a very
yes,
personal attack on her appearance and who she is as a person, that has nothing to do with their current circumstances and everything to do with how this man sees this woman. And that in itself is very harmful and hurtful. And what we're seeing and what we're inferring from these first few scenes, we can tell that this is a common occurrence, right?
yes,
um
yes, very
yes.
much so.
Yeah. And her reflections are pretty heartbreaking because she's still reflecting in the next few scenes, and she's defining their relationship. And she goes on to say, our relationship is just like this damp, aging semi basement unit. And if, for those who don't know what a semi basement unit apartment is that the actual apartment is Um, Not necessarily all the way at basement where it's fully below ground, but the actual base, it's partially a basement apartment. So they have windows out to like street level, but it's not full street level. So you could see, let's say, your viewpoint from the windows, you can see the sidewalk partially, but not the full street. So those kinds of basement like apartments are prone to flooding, to mold, to dampness, to cold. And they're not necessarily the most ideal space, but given what we know about their financial circumstances, this is what apparently they can afford. And when Naheso is thinking about their relationship, she goes on to expand on it. Romance and excitement. I remember we had that once, but they faded even faster than our love did.
Mm.
Man.
I mean,
And
even the next statement, did I
yeah.
simply wither with time?
Or was it all those long days and nights spent working to desperately fill my emptying bank account? And then we get a close up of as she's reflecting, we get a close up of her hands, which are resting on her legs. We only see her midsection, and her hand is resting on her legs, and we can see her hands are covered with bandages. So we're getting a clue in that this woman not only has like she works all day, she's working long days and nights to desperately fill the bank account and fill the gap left behind in their financial situation, because we already know that her husband just got a new job and he's on probation, so he doesn't get paid very much. Like you can see like scars and cuts on her hand outside of her
Mhm.
having these band-aids on there. So it's clear that she's working laboriously to keep them afloat, right?
Yes.
and
Mhm.
like looping back to like that, thinking about their relationship, it's like a sharp and stark contrast for her reflecting on the relationship, that like lovey-dovey relationship that she saw in the restaurant with the young couple. It's clear that there's hella tension between her and this man.
Oh, definitely. I mean, and like I said, like I know that like financial situations can create a lot of stress on the relationship, but but as you pointed out before, we see here that it's just more than the finances, and we see that with the way that he talks to her. Because even like in the next panel, he's like, "Great, now I don't even feel like eating, like it's her fault." And then she says, "Did my beauty fade because of you, or do I only have myself to blame for choosing to love you in the first place?" So I feel like this is a little bit pivotal. And the reason why I feel that way is because this is when we see that she's actually is thinking that some of this might be his fault. Um, because she's saying, "Did my beauty fade because of you?" And honestly, not to give too much away, but in future chapters, I feel like this may kind of come back. Um, so it's important to me that she's recognizing that she may not be the problem, it's him. And then she even says, "Do I only have myself to blame for choosing to love you in the first place?" So this kind of tells me that she knows about some of the problems.
She's recognizing that their relationship is problematic and
Mhm.
draining. And you like the actual body language, going back to what you said about her like sitting on the floor and the body language. Now instead of actually looking at her husband, there's a scene of her with a full white background. You can't even see the floor. It's just her
Mhm.
um in focus, and we can see like her the side profile of her face, and she's looking down. But like not only she's looking down, it looks like she's looking inward and just pondering her current circumstances, and she how she got to this point, and she's trying to figure out who she should blame for the way their relationship is right now. It's
Definitely.
so
Yeah,
sad.
it really is. And we are going to take a short break. And when we come back, we will continue our discussion on the first chapter of Tears on a Withered Flower.
Hey,
Okay.
boo.
Hey. Sorry. All right. And we are back. So when we left off, we were just talking about um, Nahesu, how she, came home and her husband's, giving her the third degree. Um,
Mhm.
you know, uh, but then we get a chapter cover, which is
Yes.
basically just like their neighborhood, um, you know, which is very like depressing. Like the lighting is like muted, like the colors are kind of drab. It's just a meh. I mean, don't get me wrong, Gainem is a brilliant artist, but the way the colors are just kind of meh, in my opinion.
Yeah, like it goes back to that palette of it being muted. And the cover that we see here, it's a back alley street, kind of like uneven sidewalks. There's trash out, but not like littering the street, but there's trash bags. It's clearly nighttime. So we're literally getting a peek at the street in front of her house at nighttime. It's a small, like narrow street, by the way, too.
Yeah,
Uh,
it is pretty narrow.
it's unremarkable, probably the slums of Seoul. And I don't know enough about Seoul, Korea to know where the hot spots are, but this ain't it.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. Um, yeah, I mean, it does look like a very, I don't know, like when I look at this, I always think of like Little Shop of Horrors when they were doing that song that's like down on Skid Row. Like that's, I don't know why, but those are the vibes I'm getting,
Are you
and I
saying
know
this
I'm,
reminds you of Baltimore? Well, I don't
um,
blame you. I'm from Baltimore, and I can see the vision, so you worry not.
I'm not trying to offend anybody, but basically what I'm saying is it definitely looks like a part of town, where you might have like a lot of downtrodden people, because it looks like, I don't know, it looks like one of those areas where, people may not have the means to, like this is the best they can do. That's the kind of vibes that I'm getting. So, and I'm sorry if I'm not explaining myself very well.
No
Um,
worries. You're trying to
you know,
visualize the scene. Well, I will say this, based off of what we're seeing in this cover, there's barely any like sidewalk surface area. So this is
yes.
not, and there's no people on the street. This is not the type of neighborhood that you're expecting to see people loitering. This is not a type of neighborhood that's like neighborhood friendly. Um,
Mhm.
that's not the vibe it's giving. It's giving very abandoned, silent. But it's clear
Yeah.
that people live there. It is highly densely packed with buildings, which I'm gonna assume are other apartment buildings. So there are people living there. It could be that it's late at night, that's why we don't see any people. Or it could be that this is just not the kind of neighborhood where you get that like neighborhood vibe where everybody knows your name and they're all looking out for you and they're all watching you on the street, or there's someone there lurking or chilling because it doesn't necessarily give that welcome. It's more so, especially like thinking of their circumstances where people live because they have to, not because they want to.
Yeah, it I don't know, like the vibe that I'm kind of getting is, everybody's minding their own business
Oh
because
yeah.
they just, that's all they have the energy. They only have the energy to worry about themselves. You know, not to sound like a certain type of way, but I mean that's legit. Like, if you're in a bad way, low income, the last thing you want to do is, try to get all up in somebody else's business when it's all you can do to like handle yours, so, you know, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's this I feel like that like this cover like really gives us a setup for like what we, can expect in the series. So,
Yeah. Agreed.
um yeah. But after we get the cover, we get the next panel. We see like a little piece of paper, there's like a bunch of squares and it's like, "Whoa, what's all this?" K barbecue on weekday afternoons, motel dusk on weekends, and the flower shop opening shift in the mornings. What the heck? Do you secretly have a time machine or something? This is, we are assuming that the person speaking here is one of Jesus' coworkers.
Mhm.
Um, and in the next panel, she's like, "How do you even pull this off, Jesus? No way you have time for all this stuff." And then Jesus just like, "Enough gawking, get your apron on, and it's time to open the shop." And then her coworker says, "See, even now you're only thinking about work." Um, yes, ponytail girl, we love her.
Yeah, there's very different vibe and dynamic than
Yes.
what we saw at the Korean barbecue spot between these, Jesus and this coworker. I'm getting the sense that, like, in comparison, Jesus is the like no nonsense, let's get this done, a personality, where this one is, she's nosy. She's giving
Yeah.
nosy.
Yeah. I mean, she also comes across as young, like maybe this is like
Mhm.
her first job, like she might be in like college or something, because I've worked with like, I've been like that coworker, like the older one, and you have the younger one that, doesn't know the meaning of TMI. So they
Yeah.
tell you everything and it's like, okay, I just asked you if you knew how to run the register. I did not need to know about your jailbird boyfriend. So
But the subject of
like,
the conversation here is poor Jesus and her work schedule. So, you know what? This gives us a clue into how, when she says she works long days and long nights to fill their bank account, she her coworker looked at her schedule and then rattled off 3 jobs. She's got 3 jobs.
mhm.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that is. Like, how do you even like find time to sleep when you're working like that many hours?
That's crazy to me. And her coworker is very shocked by this. For those of you who don't know, I know we're reading off of the official English translation, but if you read the Korean translation, which like actually on Naver, the you could tell the coworker's little bit on the younger side, because as she's looking at Jesus' schedule, she mentions the Hermione from Harry Potter and her like time turner schedule, where basically Hermione was, yeah, attending classes by using magic to basically bend the rules of time so that she could be in more than one place at one time. And Jesus, with her 3 jobs, working daytimes at the flower shop, night times at the Korean barbecue spot, and the motel on the weekends, she definitely probably could benefit from having a time turner herself, right?
Oh, definitely. I mean, if I had a time turner, I'd be using that to get some sleep.
Catch up on some Z's, catch up on some chores, catch up on some
Yep.
TV. I'm outside of the realm of being able to like exist with 3 jobs. That's crazy. She's working 3
Yeah,
jobs
I
in a
mean, I've worked 2 jobs before. I
me
never
too.
wanna do that again if I don't
Me
have
either.
to. I'm
You
done with
right.
that. Auntie is too old.
These knees and this poor my the exhaustion that I feel is beyond the scope of being able to work 3 jobs. But you know what? When you're in circumstances like hers, which is becoming more clear, you gotta do what you gotta do. If that means you
Yeah,
gotta work 3 jobs to survive while your husband is working a probationary shifts and not making very much money to make sure that your family has the basic necessities. Unfortunately, even if we complain about it, we would probably bend the knee and get to work if we got to.
yeah, I mean, it's not my first option, but, I would do it. Like, I remember the first time, when I moved to Virginia, I didn't that was the first time in, like, 12 years I had to go, like, on a job interview, and, like, I want to work at Kmart? No. But was I going to? Yes, because some money is better than no money,
Yep.
So I mean, it's just to, reiterate what you were saying. I mean, yeah, you got to do what you got to do. You know, and what's funny to me is like I have seen people, right? I used to know people in real life, who they're like, "Oh, I'm always broke. I'm always broke." And I'm like, "Oh, well, why don't you just get like a part-time gig, like work at the dollar store or something?" And they're like, "Oh, I don't want to do that." And it's like, "Okay, but you're broke. You said you can barely afford your rent. So what are you gonna do?" Like I know it's not ideal, but it's better than not paying rent. But
Very much so. I mean, like, you gotta do what you gotta do. And I mean, I can relate to like having multiple jobs and like working to make sure that I could like put food in my mouth and a roof over my head, just
Mhm.
barely. Um, when I like moved to the big city, small city girl moving to the big city and deciding that she wanted to live there, and all of the hijinks and lack of sleep I got trying to make sure that I had stayed gainfully employed. Um, oh, uh, that's another story for another day, y'all. But
Yep.
I'll tell you
That's
what,
another podcast.
that's another podcast, but I'll tell you what, you know what? Living in Seoul, Korea is not cheap. I'll put that out there. Living in the big city and trying to stay there and do what needs to be done to maintain a lifestyle for not one but two people is not easy, right? It's not ideal, it's not easy, and you're going to do what's necessary to get to maintain that life or you break.
Yeah.
And our girl, Jesus, doesn't seem like the breaking type. Um,
Nah. She seems very
nah.
practical.
Now, the next scene that we see is her coworker isn't going to work. She starts yammering on about something else. So she says, "I bet you're an S." And asks, "What does that mean?" "Huh?" she replies. "Have you never heard of MBTI?" And for people who don't know what S stands for, it stands for the personality type, which is part of the Myers Briggs type indicator for personalities, very popular personality test. And the S type personality stands for sensing. And that's it describes a type of person who takes information in. So you could say that for those, in layman's terms, it's more like an introverted person. And our female lead hadn't heard of, the Myers-Briggs type indicator personality test. And her coworker's like, "Dang, did you spend your entire life working or what?" Like, clearly she can't read the room on the fact that this lady has 3 jobs that she saw in the schedule. But I
Yes.
digress, right? And
Yes.
her coworkers yammering on at the front desk. Jesus turning on the lights. She's getting ready to open the shop. We can see there are just like beautiful white roses in front of her. There's flowers everywhere. And she's wearing the same
Mhm.
outfit that she wore yesterday, which is this muted beigeish gray colored mock turtleneck and her jeans, and now she's wearing an apron, but she's wearing a different apron because she's at a different job. She's not wearing the KBBQ one. She's wearing the flower shop one. So now we know that she's at the flower shop, and clearly this is either the next day or another day in the morning because she works at the flower shop in the morning.
Mhm.
Now we get to see Jesus working yet again in a different capacity. She's very, she's very versatile. We see her clipping away at the stems of some flowers. We don't actually see, we see her midsection, see her working. She has a small pair of scissors trimming the stems. And it goes back into the perspective of her thinking introspectively while her coworker is yammering on about her personality and the fact that all she knows how to do is work. And we hear her thoughts, and she's saying, yes, almost every second of my life was spent working once I became an adult. And in the next scene, we see light coming in through the windows of the shop, illuminating her silhouette. And we also see her arranging those flowers that she was trimming the stems of, and these are some pretty blue flowers while she's wearing this muted color. And behind her, there's the decor of the shop, and she's just getting ready for the day. And she's also saying that while she worked, spent her whole life working when she became an adult, the only exception was when I had to go to the emergency room with the flu at the age of 24. So we know this woman is in her 30s, right? Depending on who's observing her, she's Ajima, even though, you know, according to her coworker at the Korean barbecue spot, she doesn't look her age. She looks younger, but this woman hasn't had like basically a day off since she was 24 and had to go to the emergency room for the flu. That's not a real day off.
It really isn't. I mean, this goes what I find interesting here is that you have, dare I say, the juxtaposition of
Mhm.
her younger coworker who seems, very clueless to how cruel life can really be. Because all
Girl.
she is talking about is like, oh, all you ever do is work. And never once did she stop to think why, why she works so many jobs. She never thought to ask that question, right?
Mhm.
Whereas Jesus, who obviously could explain why, chooses not to. And I kind of think that the reason for that is that it's not going to change her circumstances.
No.
Because from what we're seeing here, like Jesus is kind of the type of person that if there's a problem, instead of freaking out about it, she's just going to try to find a solution. Because honestly, freaking out gets you nowhere.
Absolutely
And
not.
and honestly, the energy that you could spend freaking out would be better spent trying to find a solution. So she comes across as very pragmatic to me. Um, and I think it's kind of ignorant and it just shows like the immaturity of like ponytail girl when she's like, "Dang, did you spend your entire life working or what?" And the fact that, like you said, she's only taken a day off like once because of the flu. I mean, that that just says a lot. And the fact that she's just like doing her own thing right now, like she's like tending to the flowers, she's doing what she's supposed to, not even giving ponytail girl the time of day, just kind of tells me that like, she's done with this conversation. It's not something that she really wants to hash out. And honestly, I can't say that I blame her. Like, why do you have to explain everything you do, you know, to someone like that who probably doesn't get it, you know? So
Yeah.
I can, you know, like I can understand why she doesn't want to expend the energy because she's like conserving the energy that she does have just to get through the fucking day.
Because she
And
has 3 jobs.
exactly, exactly. So I can very much understand why she doesn't want to address that particular elephant. Um,
Yeah.
but we but getting to the next panel, like after she talks about the flu, you know, we see there's a calendar, right? And then we see there's a date circled where it says 13th marriage anniversary. And and then the next word box we get, it says, in the early years of our marriage, I was scrambling to build a family without help from my parents. And then we get a flashback, right? And then it says, Hey Sue. And it looks like her husband kneeling in front of her. He says, I'm so sorry. I just wanted to give you a good life, I swear. And in the next panel, we see Jesus standing in front of him, and he's still on his knees. And he says, But I screwed up. How much? And then he looks up, and you can tell that he's crying here. And he says, Huh? How much money did you borrow under my name? Does this mean you're forgiving me? And then Minchell stands up, or her husband stands up to hug her. So
Mm.
the next panel says, I wasn't particularly sad or distraught when I was faced with the mountain of debt. I just felt blank. I'd figured I'd pay it off eventually if I worked hard enough. But sometimes I'd feel a sudden rush of intense emotion that would make me want to cry, though the burden of his debt remained with us. It was his love that disappeared first. All right, so
Mm.
my beautiful flowers. So, for those that are new, um, a lot of people ship Minchol, which is Jesus' husband, instead of the other love interests, which will be introduced shortly. But after I read this, I was
Chapter
like,
1.
oh, yeah, in chapter one, I was like, oh, this explains a lot. So, to break it down to you, this man, when they were young, borrowed money, a large amount of money. But mind you, it wasn't even in his name. He put it in
Nope.
Jesus' name
Yep.
without her knowing. I
Yep.
just want to say it again for the people in the back. This man took out a large debt under her name.
Under her name without
Yep.
her knowing.
Yep.
Very important information.
Yes.
So audacity abounds, my friends, because we've
It
seen him
really
be out.
does.
Oh, um, and he had the sense to look remorseful at the very least. And I'm gonna assume, based off of what we know from chapter 1, that this is a flashback. And the Jesus that we see in this flashback is wearing very different clothes. Actually, she had like more color to her, more life, I suppose. But we don't get
Hmm.
to see very much of her expression. And similar to the flashback of seeing her like introspectively thinking as she's like, sitting in the living room of their like semi basement apartment, this too uses that stark background that where it's all white with backlit figures of herself and her husband on his knees begging her for forgiveness. Actually, not even really begging for forgiveness, admitting to his sins. And she's like looking down, and that body language is she's grasping one arm tightly and very, very, very like restrained in her
Yes.
answers.
Yes.
Um, and he automatically, like, in this particular interaction, when she asked how much the debt was, he didn't he just automatically assumed that he was forgiven and
Yes, I was
embraces
gonna bring that
her.
up.
And you can see her eyes are wide open. She's not embracing him back. She's
No.
just staring off into the distance, like, going back to me saying, like, she looks like she disassociates when she talks to him. This is this is disassociated. She's not embracing him back. He's assuming that he's forgiven.
And that's
And
the thing with him,
yeah.
like, in this instance, and sorry to cut you off, but I just
No
wanted to make a
worries.
very quick point. Like, that's the thing, like, he doesn't ask. He doesn't ask, "Will you forgive me for what I've done?" He assumes, and she
Mhm.
doesn't say anything, and he is taking her silence as meaning that she forgave him. And
Yep.
honestly, I don't think that is the case. And because of what we seen earlier this chapter, we know that there's like distance between them, like emotionally, right? And part of me wonders if she was low key resenting him for what he did to her. Because honestly, I would not be surprised. And then when she talks about how, I wasn't particularly sad or distraught when I was faced with the mountain of debt, I just felt blank. I figured I'd pay it off eventually if I worked hard enough. Like, this tells me that, like, I think the reason why she reacted the way that she did was because there was nothing she could do. The debt was already taken out. You know, it's not like she can have him give the collectors the money back because more than likely he probably already spent it. But you know, I kind of feel like she felt that way because she didn't want to be mad, but she was, if that makes sense. Like, I think she was having trouble processing her emotions because she comes across as very introverted, and maybe I know there are reasons for why she's not good at expressing her emotions, but the fact is that one, he did not even talk to her about taking the money, about borrowing money, number one.
For God knows
And
what.
uh-huh. And then number two, he didn't ask, like we said, mentioned earlier, he didn't ask for her forgiveness. He just assumed that he had it. So yeah. And I mean, I will say that like this scene right here, has a very big part to play in the story to come.
Their
Um,
dynamics too.
yeah. I mean, it I will say that with Minchol, like he has a history of just assuming that Jesus will go along with whatever he wants, and then when things don't go his way, he blames her. But that's sorry for the slight spoilers, but my beautiful flowers, this man triggers me.
Yeah, you're not alone. Um, I do want to loop back to that very first scene before the flashback, and just an indicator for everyone who's first reading this story. Um, this particular story is set in the winter time, and we're getting a clue in of the time that it's happening because we see that the 14th is circled for their 13th marriage anniversary. So clearly they've been married 13 years. And it's December 14th that is the anniversary for their 13th anniversary. So I just wanted to put that out there because the changing of the seasons will also play a part. But we're currently looking, perhaps looking forward to uh, a 13th anniversary in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We haven't
Now
crossed that bridge yet.
we haven't, but it gives us so we have, at this point in the story, we know their financial situation, the dynamics of their relationship, how hard she works, and why she needed to have a month advance on her salary to cover. now we know debts that were put into her name by her husband without her consent, which is always fun. That, and we also
Mhm.
know she's suppressing some strong emotions because in one of the scenes we see her, like pruning a flower, and she's talking about how she feels a sudden rush of intense emotion, and we can see her hands tremble, and then she steadies them. And I've said it multiple times, she disassociates from that rush of emotion just so she can forge forward to just deal with the problem at hand. But that is not a sustainable way of living, and I know
Mhm.
she knows it.
Yep. And like what's really sad about this is like the next part when she talks about, how even though the wording is very particular here. So it says though the burden of his debt remained with us, it was his love that had disappeared first.
Mm.
Um, so I think again, my beautiful flowers. So despite what he did to this woman, eventually as we've seen in the earlier chapter, he starts to treat her like garbage.
Yep.
And it just makes me mad. Oh, it makes me so mad.
Rage
How
bait.
Yeah, pretty much. But we move on to the next panel, which
Yep.
is somebody walking in. And then we see Ponytail Girl saying, "Welcome in." And we see this tall, handsome Korean boy, and he's got a nice butt. Um, sorry. And then we see Ponytail Girl whispering to Hey Sue, "It's the Rose guy." And Hey Sue's like, "The Rose guy?" And Ponytail Girl's like, he's just really a hot guy who comes in and buys roses every single day. All the workers call him that because we don't know his name. If you don't mind if I take this order, right?" And then Ponytail Girl starts walking away, and she's like, Jesus like, "Go ahead," and she's like, "Thanks." So, Hey Sue is watching her, and she's like, "Well, it's good to be young." And then Ponytail Girl's like, "Hello, which flowers are you looking to purchase?" And we see this dude is actually pretty tall looking. And then
Mhm.
we get the first glance at his face, and he is a handsome dude for sure. But it looks like he's kind of looking over at Hey Sue. Um, and then we see Ponytail Girl like sparkle, sparkle. She's like ready to take his order, but he's looking at Hey Sue. And Hey Sue is totally oblivious. She's like absorbed in like cutting ribbons or whatever. And then he gets her attention and he's like, "I'm ready to order." And he's talking directly at her. And she's like, "Sorry." She's like, he says, "Could you take my order, please?" So this is our first interaction with our male lead.
Yep.
Um,
Mhm.
and I will say that I have a type when it comes to manhwa dudes, and this guy fills it. He is tall, he has dark hair. I don't know why. That is my thing. Everybody has their thing. But I will say that this guy is very handsome. Um, so the next panel, we it's the flashback again where, Ponytail Girl's telling Jesus he's a rose guy that comes in every day. And then Jesus is like, just a really hot guy. I wouldn't be too sure about that. Just seems like a weirdo to me. And then she's like ringing him up, and that's typical Jesus, to be honest. And she's like, "Would that be a bouquet of roses?" And he says, "Yes." And he's like, "I'm happy you remembered." And the chapter ends.
Yes.
So, we got a few things that we can unpack here, though. Like
Absolutely.
first off, I just want to point out Ponytail Girl pouting because he didn't want her to take the order.
Well, in her haste, she nearly knocks Jesus' shoulder out of its socket in her haste to like go help him at the register. And that man, seeing all of her sparkling enthusiasm, ponytail sparkling enthusiasm, looks at her at the register and turns and taps on the countertop to get Jesus' attention when she's like clearly like she's like, all right, well, he's being taken care of. There's nothing for me to do here. He went
Mhm.
out of his way to get her to look at him. And I want to point out something real quick. When he stepped through the door, one of the stark contrasts between him and Jesus is that this man is bathed in sunlight
Yes.
from the moment he walks through the door. So it is clear that we're looking at a prominent character.
Yes. I mean, honestly, like when I first saw this, I was like, "Oh." You know, so I was like, all right, I see you gain him. I see what you doing here. You giving us a good setup for something.
Yes.
And honestly, like, first, comments aside, like I really like how like Teha is drawn.
Mhm.
because he's in a very snazzy looking outfit.
Very chic.
Um,
Very
yeah,
chic.
Mhm. Like the hair, looks really nice. Like he does look kind of young, but he definitely draws attention.
Yep.
So, and I can understand why Ponytail Girl is like butthurt that he ignored her.
Yes, the pout is hilarious to me. Like he looked her in the face and then just decided not to acknowledge her. And
Yep.
his like a lot has been said when he first walks through the door. A lot his mannerisms said a lot more than even words could say because he has this like presence about him, and you
Mhm.
could see like his face seems very pleasant, very like not bland, but like hard to read. But his eyes look at Ponytail, and then you could see his eye without even like changing the direction of his face and looking direct. Because like some people like when they're looking at someone, they turn their head. He didn't
Mhm.
even turn his head. He just
Yep.
like you could see his eyes from the
Mhm.
side looking at her, and then he's just like, well, there there was like a level of like intensity and determination in the way he like focuses in, and he decides today will be the day. Mind you, this man has been coming in every day and she didn't notice him, but today he decided this will be the day.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it was, but got her
Yeah.
attention. And she's like, he's a
Yeah.
weirdo, which is hilarious to me. Well,
Yeah, it really is. I mean, but honestly, that's kind of on brand for her. And, it makes me kind of wonder that because she's so used to like working all the time, I have no doubt that she probably doesn't really have time to like socialize. So, of course, somebody like ignoring her coworker who is, I guess capable of, completing his order, but then comes directly to her. I mean, yeah, I could see where, that might be, I don't want to say off-putting, but I could see where, she might think that is weird, because
yes.
I will say with like Hey Sue, like like she takes things at like face value, I want to say. Um, but I kind of feel like it's mostly because she's just not used to dealing with people, especially ones that like strangers, like I mean obviously she knows how to do her job, but like, this man is coming across like, hey, you know what I mean? Like he's got that vibe kind of. Especially like, when he's like looking at Jesus like sideways, like, you can definitely tell that there's like a vibe, if that makes
Ye-
sense.
Yes, there is clear, not necessarily, we don't know what the interest is, but there's clear focus on her. And not only that, I think that Nahesu is used to dealing with the public because she's in, she's in customer service,
Mhm.
but that singular focus, like that decision to not leverage the person that's in front of them trying to help him, but actually get her attention, it's clear. She looks very wary when she realizes that he's speaking to her.
Mhm.
She's looking like, "Why are you even talking to me? You were
Yep.
already being helped." So it's not she's not accustomed, you can tell from this single interaction that she's not accustomed to being focused on as a human of interest, period,
Yes.
point blank.
Mhm.
Now, I want to put something out there that's very important because, these two are wearing similar outfits. This man has on a black turtleneck, not a mock turtleneck, an actual turtleneck, in jeans that are like a dark wash that are similar to the jeans that Jesus is wearing. And then he has a shearling coat, a short shearling coat on top of it. Um, I noticed that. I was like, "Oh, this is very Steve Jobs-esque outfit on." And I realized those two are both wearing turtlenecks. Now, of course, I don't know if that's significant in the story for now, but I just wanted to put that out there that they're wearing sort of similar outfits, but this young man, whoever he might be, definitely has an edge of elegance and like he looks like money.
Yeah, he really does. Like even just like the way, that he like talks, like even though we don't really get like much in the way of dialogue, but I feel like it comes across as, kind of like refined manners. And like
Mhm.
my headcanon says he smells really good.
Oh, yeah, he looks like he smells good,
Oh
and
yeah.
he's just covered in light orbs, like, he's very sparkly in this moment, and I wanna acknowledge that he has that male lead glow. I just wanna put it out here
Yes.
because he
Yes, he
light
does.
orbs all over him. He has his own lighting, company
Yeah.
follow him around at this
Yes.
point.
No, I agree. I mean, if you even look at like the last, panel, where he's, saying it's like, "Oh, you remembered." Like, I feel like what I really like about this is how everything else is like blurred slightly. Like, like the stuff that's on the counter and the background and this and the uh drawing of Ha, which is the male lead, and Sue, like that is like sharper and more to the forefront, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. So, so with the way this chapter ends, it ends with the focus on both of them.
Yep.
So we know that stuff is gonna go down.
Yes, it is. Yes,
And
it
I will
is.
say that I also like the coloring
Yep.
in this panel too because it's like kind of bright and
Very.
it feels like sunny, almost like a breath of fresh air, which I think she needed. So, but anyways, that's just the art nerd in me coming out a little
Yes.
bit. But
It's
I love it.
necessary because we spent a good deal a portion of this webtoon with the harshness of night and the blandness of like the coloring palette is very bland when it's just Jesus and work and her neighborhood and her home. And then this moment when she's in the flower shop and there's like a sharp contrast to that overcast
Mhm.
vibe that
Yep.
comes with her going working and going home at night. This daytime element is very shiny, very vibrant,
Yeah. And I
pastels
like
and
it.
oranges. Me
And it works
too.
on her too. It really works for her.
Yes, it does. And this particular chapter hooked me immediately. Thank you to the author Gay for giving us this masterpiece of a chapter one. It was so worth it.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, I will say that like the art, part of what hooked me from the first chapter was like the art.
Yes.
I mean, the story was really good, but I mean, the art, I think, really, brings this manhwa together. And I just love her style. Like, just the way that, like, like we get, I don't know, it's just like you can tell that, Gainem really has a very big art background.
Yes.
Just like the way they're posed and even though it's like stylized, it's like almost like an anime style because of like the big eyes, but the proportions do look kind of real. So, I don't know, like I just really appreciate it so much. I mean, honestly, that's a lot of what I like about manhwa art is I like how it's not as I feel like it's a little bit more realistic than manga art, if that makes
Mm.
sense. Like I feel like there's more realism in manhwa, but that's just me. And it
This
could be just an aesthetic thing, so.
it's a the this particular webtoon, I could definitely see this getting animated because of this, like you could see, even though it's still, still snapshots of this particular story, you could see the motion. The artist, the author and artist, the same person, strikes a balance between those bold the bold line art, and then the delicate like feathering and like texture and depth and body proportions. To me, like overall, for this to be a first chapter, and as far as I am aware, I have not seen any other work. I think this is the first work from the author. I may be wrong. Maybe they have another pseudonym, but I have never seen this art style from another author, and I consume a lot of content because I got time on my hands apparently, but I've not seen this art style. And of course, like it draws me in because there's a level of clean appeal to the way that the characters are drawn, where it's
Mm.
not too surreal, but it still has that element of like you could see it being animated as a, a cartoon anime, like seriously.
Yes. Mhm. It does have the elements of an anime, but I think it would have to be like a mature one.
And it would
But
definitely.
yeah. Yeah.
We already saw from the first dream sequence with the husband cheating with an anonymous woman, that there are spicy scenes in this particular piece of work. And for those who have access to the webtoon on in its original format on Naver, um, know how spicy it can get, especially for chapter one. It's uncensored, but
Mhm.
it doesn't. One of the things I do like about this series is that it's not overshadowed by the mature themes. It ties in and it still has a story to tell, which really drew me in.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm all about mature stories and honestly, like I love that we live in an age where, we're able to get stories like this. I mean, I know I have been like a girl geek for like oh my god, almost all my life. And like growing up, like what really kind of started like my love of comics was Archie comics. I used to buy like the double digest at the grocery store and then
Oh,
it just
wow.
moved on. Yeah. I was a huge like Archie fan. And then when I got older, I got into like comic books, but it was like X-Men and Gen 13 and, just a lot of like superhero titles, like some,
Mhm.
like there were some indie ones in there, like Lady Death and a few others like Strangers in Paradise, but you know, and those were fun to read, but after a while, it's just the story is formulaic and it's not something that really, um, you know, matured with me. But like now that I'm older, and there's the internet now, I'm so excited that we have like this medium because I feel like for a lot of females that like comics and like manga, sometimes we don't really always have like good stories. So when you find one, you definitely just want to tell everybody about it, because if you like it, somebody else is going to like it. You
Yes.
know. So I like the options that, that we, can get something other than like another OP dude running around trying to get the MacGuffin to beat the bad guy. I mean, don't get me wrong, like I love a good superhero story, but in this time of my life, I think I like stories that are a little bit more real, if that makes sense. Like I feel
Yes.
like, stories that resonate with me are the ones that I tend to enjoy. And don't get me wrong, I love me some Don Da Don. I love some fairy tale. I still love anime, but as I've gotten older, and I'm now 48, my tastes in anime and manga have changed. And some of the stuff that I used to like feels very juvenile to me, and I think a lot of it is because of all the manhwa I've been reading for the past couple years. So, anyways, that's Auntie's take. Um, but yeah.
You know, for me, I started off not necessarily, my life and livelihood of being an avid reader started off with graphic novels like the work by Wendy and Richard Penny called ElfQuest, which
Oh, okay.
had mature. It's a you know it's a fantasy not graphic novel that has mature themes in it, and I also love reading novels along with the comic books that I would read and the graphic novels. So I'm a Regency romance lover where you don't necessarily, but I love fantasy too. But that used to be my bread and butter, reading Regency romances and reading novels for days. And one of the reasons why I've gravitated so much to Tears on a Withered Flower is that while it is a webtoon, it also has this element of being a novel itself because there's a lot of introspection that you'll see, and it fleshes out the character beyond just letting the visuals speak for themselves. And it tells a story in a way that doesn't rely only on the visuals to tell the story about who these people are. It enhances it, of course, but
Hmm.
it reads to me in the way that the novels that I used to read do. And even the graphic novel that I'm talking about called ElfQuest, which is one of my favorite graphic novels of all time, um, it has that like flow of a storyline where you actually get the lore, you get the understanding. They're giving you in chapter one alone. I understood the dynamics between Hey Sue and her husband, her work life, her finances, her outlook on herself and life. And then we have the disruptor that walks through the door covered in sunlight that illuminates her after all the gloominess that we got. And it's like it makes it clear that there's something that's going to happen that's outside of the scope of what she's
Oh,
accustomed to dealing with.
definitely.
And I got excited from chapter one because I was just like, this is my element. This is my vibe. Without it being too cliche. Like I think unfortunately, her husband is presented in that drab, villainous cliche at the time. But it's clear that it's not the dynamic between them is not as simple because if it was simple, then it would be easy to for her to disconnect from that relationship. It
Hmm.
would be fairly simple because reading manhwa, reading manga, reading what I do because I consume copious amounts of different kind of content. You get
Same.
you get accustomed to that cliche where it's like, oh, there's a downtrodden female lead who's always sad,
Yes.
and her husband or the villain who's so mean to her, she cries, someone swoops in and saves her, and she never thinks
Yep.
again about the person. Or the next time she sees the person, she's like she's the empress that's been reborn.
Oh yeah. that's why I call those my guilty pleasures because I
Yep.
know what I'm getting into when I read it.
Junk
Like
food.
usually, exactly, but I'm all for it. Like,
I still read
and
those
there's
too.
yeah, I mean, sometimes you just want something light, and I will say that as the chapters go on, the story does get darker. And honestly, I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to, read something light, but but what I really like about this is that to me, this reminds me a lot of classical literature. And for those that don't know, for those that might be new listening, we do have, as I mentioned earlier, we have a Discord, and every Friday we have like a live chat, where we talk about the chapter, the new
Mhm.
chapter that releases. So one of the things that I've always said, is that this the way this manhwa is written, it reminds me of a lot of classical literature,
Yeah.
because you have a lot of like classical elements to this story. And I'm just, honestly, I'm just really excited to, share that with everyone, and talk about this because, it's been my life for like almost a year now. um, I
Yes.
have been consumed by this manhwa. uh, but I've made friends along the way, so, you know,
It's the adventure, it's the content, it's the friends we made along the way. And here we are now to bring you the unfiltered, in depth rundown of Tears on the Withered Flower, Chapter 1. Look at us.
yeah, we actually did it. So, well, this is going to wrap up our first episode. So, thank you very much for those that took the time to listen. Again, we are called the Withered Flowers podcast.
Mm-hmm.
We also have, as mentioned before, we have our Discord server, so please feel free to drop in and say hi. We have a lot of really good active folks. We have theories, we have those that just want to hang out, so please check us out. We will be dropping this podcast every 2 weeks, so please feel free to subscribe. And yeah, just let us know what you think. So, on behalf of the Withered Flowers, we thank you for listening.
Thank you guys.
Goodbye.
Bye.
The Withered Flowers podcast is hosted by Digital Gurl and Auntie Lura. Produced and edited by Auntie Lura. Music is Bodega Cat by Dayala. If you would like to join our Discord, please see the link in the show notes. And special thanks to our family, friends, and spouses that have supported us while producing this podcast. We would also like to thank all of our Discord members as well. Without you, we wouldn't be here. Until next time.